I apprenticed in 1995. Back then it was a real close trade. It was tough to get into the industry. It was something that you needed to do a formal apprenticeship because there was no school for it, there was no books. Overall it took maybe a year, year and a half, because there's different stages of apprenticeships. At first you walk through the door and you basically are like a peasant. You sweep up, you clean toilets, you wash their cars, you do whatever it takes to learn the craft.
I started tattooing in 1991, and tattooing was legalized in New York City in 1997. I'm really glad that I got to experience that time because it was definitely a whole different scene than what it is now. I remember when I first started tattooing, we had the Tattoo Society meetings. We would go to those and they always felt very illicit and underground.
I was kind of brought into it by my father. My father started tattooing when I was about 4 years old, and he tattooed out of the house because it was illegal at the time. So he had a very professional kind of studio that he set up in the house for tattooing. So I was around it most of my life.
I consider myself both an artist and a craftsman. You need to be a technician as well as an artist.
I would say I feel like I'm more of a craftsman because it's a contract between me and my client.
I think one of the things that I learned from my father is the idea that artistry comes from mastery of craft.
I got into tattooing when I was in high school. I started getting tattooed. Just whenever I got a chance, I hung out in shops, and if I had a few dollars, I would try to get another tattoo.
Tattooing always had something magical I was obsessed with. It was something I couldn't stop thinking about. It was almost like a drug for me. I never really had any formal art training. I would sift through magazines and books and cut out these different tattoos that inspired me, and I then made scrapbooks out of it, and I would skim through the scrapbooks and try to understand why these tattoos were good and what made them good tattoos, and really understand the visual vocabulary.
Since modern tattooing was invented right here in New York City, I feel like that you can see that in the work that comes out of here. The iconic imagery and the bold outlines and the bold colors and the black shading. It's still here today, and it definitely influences my artwork to a great extent.
The New York style, especially at this point, is derivative of lots of different influences artistically from around the world. But early on, it was really lots of hard, bold lines, lots of very bold images. It's become a world scene, and the tattoo culture has grown so exponentially over the last 40 years.
New York makes it, the rest of the world takes it. We create it here, and it trickles down. I think New York tattooing and New Yorkers in general recognize that there's other worlds out there. And we take little bits and pieces that inspire us or move us emotionally, and we kind of incorporate that into our world and maybe create a new trend.
It's harder to generalize now what tattoos say about anybody, because now like every sort of person comes in to get tattooed. It used to be much more underground, it used to be much more outsider. These days it's very mainstream, and anybody can come in.
Basically, the craft of tattooing, as it's applied to the body, has been the same for 100 years. It's hard to say that the technology itself has necessarily affected the imagery, but the level of artistry by the practitioners has changed. You have a lot more people that are more classically trained in visual arts becoming involved with tattooing, and that definitely changed the scope of the visual language of tattoo.
Over time, the ink migrates under the skin. So you have to take that into consideration when you design a tattoo. You can't tattoo lines too close together because eventually they'll bleed together and they'll look like one. You want to design tattoos that stand the test of time, that look good in 10 years as they did the day you did them.